Okay, in part 2 of our flashlight tutorial, we're going to be, first off, adding sockets to both our character, where we want to be holding the flashlight in our hand, as well as adding a socket to our flashlight mesh, where we would want the light to be coming out of, like where we want the light source to start. Then, I'm not exactly sure how far we're going to be getting along in this video. We will be getting into a little bit of coding. We will probably end up just attaching the light switch to the character's hand before stopping it, since I do kind of want to keep these in separate parts so they're not overly long. So let's go ahead and get started, and we can first go ahead and add a socket. Well, actually, let's just add a socket to our mesh. So if we go to our flashlight folder, find our flashlight, just double click. And if you click on the flashlight, well, you don't even need to. You can see down here at the bottom right, or wherever yours is, you should see Socket Manager. If you don't see that, come up here to Window, and make sure to click Socket Manager. Your window should come up. Now for starters, let's go ahead and hit Create Socket. And I'm going to call mine light underscore socket. And here we need to move it directly upward. So I want this to be just right perfectly, oops, above, go up, just gently, perfect, right above where the end, or the face of the lens would be. And as you can see, it's in the dead center. So now we have a socket that we can reference for its location as well as its rotation. Since its rotation pretty much be straightforward, which we can see by attaching a preview mesh statue. Oh, that's pretty big. But you can see it's coming up straight vertical, it's not rotated or anything. So go ahead and click Save. Now we will do the same thing for our character. So go here to Mannequin, Character, Mesh. We want this skeletal mesh. Now from here, click on Skeleton over just on the left side of the tabs. Then go ahead and click on his hand. So I'm going to have it being held in the right hand. Whoa, a little quick. So this is roughly where I want to create the socket, just down in here. So what we can do is, over here, hand underscore R, we can right click and add socket. Click on the socket. We're going to change the name. I'm going to call it hand underscore R underscore socket. Actually, let's just capital S. Why not? And then just simply click and drag it into position. So really just be down to roughly the center of the hand. Down a bit here. That's pretty good. So if we, for instance, we attach our light switch to the socket, if you recall in our Blender mesh, where the origin was, the origin is at the dead center bottom. So the origin is going to be right where this socket is. So this little dot is going to be where this little dot is here. So that's why I said we'll be changing this later. So we can set it up so where we have our origin and whatever object that we do create, that will be where the, well, where it attaches to the center of the hand. So we will eventually be moving this up to roughly the center. Alright, so we have our socket in place where we want it. Let's go ahead and hit save and close out of that. Now we need to actually create our light switch, our flashlight class. So it's going to be an actor, so right click, new C++ class, click actor, next, I call it flashlight. Go ahead and let it build and do its thing. Now once this is built, I want to go ahead and add a roof and dim the light a little bit in the world so we can see everything a lot easier. As you can assume, it's kind of hard to see the light from a flashlight while you're actually out in broad daylight. So what we can do is we can click this floor here, just like so, where we can drag it up. We can do hold Alt and drag it up to create a duplicate. A little higher. About there. And now for the world light, we click on this directional light here. Just lower the intensity from 5 to, oh, 0 is good. And I'm going to go ahead and file save. So what we're going to be doing to our flashlight will be demonstrated directly through here. So first off, let's say this right here is just our actor. There's no mesh, so ignore what you see here visually. We're going to be adding a static mesh component, which is in turn going to add the static mesh of our flashlight model that we created in Blender. After that, we're going to be going through and adding a light component, and we're going to be using a spotlight. So let's go ahead and add our spotlight component. And the spotlight is going to be go up, attached to the socket, like roughly there. And we're going to alter its rotation so it shoots directly up. That is not very bright. Trying to find where even the cone is. It's not showing me where the really has the cone that we can visualize where it's pointing to. Oh, there it goes. Had to click on the actual. Alright, well, whatever. So it's shining upward just like that, like so. So it'll be following the path of the flashlight properly. That's what we're going to be doing, but code. So anytime we create our flashlight object, it's going to automatically create the static mesh and set it so it's visually what we see, which was the flashlight model. Then we're going to be adding a spotlight component to it, and then setting miscellaneous stuff such as the brightness. So once we have that created, we can easily toggle it on and off by simply altering the brightness or just toggling the visibility of that light component. I'm going to go ahead and delete this spotlight component. And we can go into our C++ code. So a couple of things that we want to include. First off, since we're going to be using a spotlight, we need to include a spotlight component. And since we're going to be adding a static mesh, we include static mesh. These will be in the description just like always. So we're going to go ahead and add these to our header. And then in our .cpp, and that indicates that my food's done if you can hear the beeping, we're going to add constructor helpers, which will allow us to find a direct path to this mesh here. First off, we want to make a new section, private, and I want to make a static mesh. So static mesh, let's just call it, pointer. Let's just call it mesh. I want to make a directional light or spotlight component, sorry. We would do spotlight component, light. Oh, yeah, I'm just going to call it light. Alrighty, let me go get my food real quick and I'll be right back. So now what we want to do is we want to store our mesh, our flashlight, to, well, mesh. This is where we would use our constructor helpers. Now, what we're going to be doing is 90% of it's going to be done inside of the constructor of our flashlight class. What we do is static constructor helpers f object finder, and that is a template, so we need the type name, which is static mesh. Then we need the path to our mesh. Well, actually, our name of it here. We're just going to call it FL mesh, flashlight mesh. So we can go back into Unreal Engine, find our mesh, right click on it, click copy reference, go back to Visual Studio, and paste it in there just like so. Now from here, we can actually assign our mesh to it. So this is assuming it finds it. So mesh equals fl mesh dot object. If mesh equals null pointer, I want to go ahead and print out a message. So ue log temp warning next error finding static mesh. And just to go ahead and save some time later, I'm going to go ahead and build it now. And we can set up our ray trace to get started on this. So in our ray trace class that we've made before, that is also going to be set up in the description. Instead of just to save us from having to write something else for it, we're going to set it up so whenever we press E, which is our object interactions, we're going to simply spawn the flashlight on our player's hand. So we can do that by simply go ahead and just commenting out or delete, your choice, everything inside of toggle light switch. And here's where we would, well, we're going to make a public function here anyways. We would do all of our flashlight code. So first off, we want to include it, so include flashlight.h. And inside of here, we want to actually use spawn actor to, well, literally do as it says. We're going to be spawning that flashlight class into our world. What we can go ahead and do is a flashlight. Now we need to go off of get world spawn actor and the type, which is a flashlight. And here's where we have our parameters. So you can kind of scroll through the list and everything and just see it, but all we really need to do is just pass in the class. So a flashlight static class. This should create our actor somewhere in the world, and we're going to determine that location somewhere inside of here. So let's see what I want to do. We can go ahead and create the public function in here real quick. So we're going to do void attach flashlight. Put this right below begin play. Void a flashlight attach flashlight, and we want to make it take in an actor, which is ourselves, so we have a reference to attach to attach the light to. So a actor player, that's just what we're going to call it, a actor player. So what the logic behind this is going to be is when this line runs, it creates the flashlight in the world, and we already have a reference to it. So from here, we would just do flashlight attach flashlight. So once this gets created by this line, everything in its constructor will run. So we're going to be setting the mesh, which we need to add a mesh component to our light. We need to add a spotlight component, and we need to move the spotlight to our socket. So it's going to have the socket's rotation and the socket's location. So that's going to be attached just where we want it. And from there, when this gets called, we're going to be simply using attach to component. We're going to attach the light, this, to our player. And it's really quite simple. So I'm going to go ahead and set it up so it runs our function. Flashlight. Completely forgot what I called it. Attach flashlight. We're going to pass in get owner, since ray trace is actually on our character here, just like so. Okay, I'm back several weeks later, as you can probably tell by the jump in the date if you're looking. But just continuing on. So now that whenever we create our flashlight, we are in fact calling this function here. Well, we need to do a couple of things first. First off, we need to give our flashlight of the actual, we need to set its static mesh to, well, our mesh here. And well, yeah, let's just go ahead and do that. So one thing we want to include, a component. So components / static mesh component. We're going to store it here. So u static mesh component. Just call it mesh component. Now up here, since we only want this to set if the mesh is not null, we want to go ahead and create a default subobject, and that's going to be our static mesh component. So mesh component equals create default subobject u static mesh component. As you can see here, it takes in two things: the object name, so f name, call it static mesh component, set transient to false. I kind of spelled it wrong, which I did. Alright, from there, we can go ahead and do mesh component, set static mesh, and give it our, up here, mesh, which is pretty much the direct link to our actual flashlight mesh that we created in Blender. So just for means of demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and set the position when it gets created to our player's position. So this set actor location, and the location is going to be player get actor location, just like so. I'm going to go ahead and print out a log. Spawning flashlight. Now whenever we press E, it's going to spawn our flashlight class. The constructor is going to run. It's going to set its static mesh. Then we're going to call this function here to attach the flashlight to ourselves. But right now we're just setting it to our own location just so we can visibly see it. So let's go ahead and hit play and press E. As you can see, spawning flashlight, and we have our flashlight here. You can also see it has collision. And just for an example of why you would want to disable the collisions, let me go ahead and attach it. So this attached to actor, see parent actor, so player, then the rules, so F attach and transform rules. I'm just going to snap to target, not including scale. Don't care about where it's attaching to. And what you should see is it's going to be continually trying to push us out of the way, since we have a static mesh with collision that is inside of our own mesh. So press E, and as you can see, it's pretty much kind of, well, you can kind of get an idea of what's happening. It's hard to move the camera out of the way, but that's not how we want it. We want to go ahead and disable those collisions as well, even though we are going to be just attaching it to our hand socket here soon. We can do that in the constructor. Mesh component. Let's just search for it by collision. See what we find. We can see that it wants to be collision enabled, so set collision enabled. You can see the type, an enum, so E collision enabled. We're just going to set it to no collision. Go ahead and build it. Still no internet. Now when we press E, on the flashlight, and we're not being moved anywhere else. But if you can kind of see through the slot in our character, or if I just jump, yep, you can see the flashlight is inside of him, and everything's like it's not affecting how we move around or play at all, because it's not a, well, no collision. So we're gonna go ahead and leave all this set up as is and remove these two lines. Okay, now that we have our flashlight spawning, we need to go ahead and attach it to our player's hand. So if you recall, we're going to go ahead and find the socket name real quick. So just look at our mannequin, go to skeleton, and just click, and I closed the wrong. Alright, click on his hand, scroll down, you will see our socket name here, hand_r_socket. I'm going to go ahead and copy the name, and just comment it just for, actually probably don't even need to do that, but now we're going to be using our attach to. Well, instead of doing attach to actor, we're going to do attach to component. So as you will see here in a second, first thing it takes in is a useScene component. So we need to get that from our player. So uScene component, scene component equals player, find component by class, uScene component. Then just to make sure it's not null, if scene component does not equal null pointer, then we want to, attach the flashlight mesh to our scene component. The first parameter, scene component, then the attachment rules, so F attachment transform rules, map the target, not including scale, so it's just going to move itself to our hand. And here's where we want the socket name. So F name and _r_socket, just like so. This will attach it to our hand. Now, this is going to be the end of this part, but for the next part, we're going to need to be setting the light to our flashlight's socket as well. So we want to go ahead and do a couple little things here. So after we create our mesh component, we want to create a root, we'll set our root component. So root component equals mesh component, just like so. And here we can set up the attachment later on. So let's go ahead and build, and I'll, well, show you. It should be attached to the player's hand. Press E. As you can tell, the flashlight is now in the player's hand, and it moves along with it just fine. But as you can see, the very base of the flashlight, that back portion, is at, well, pretty much where our socket location is. So if we look here, lower the sensitivity, or the speed, sorry. You can see it's right there in the dead center of the hand, and that's where the flashlight is, because that's where we set the root of it, or the origin. So I'm going to go ahead and actually alter that now. And you can do that by simply dragging it just ever so slightly down to about where we want the hand to grip it. So we'll have it roughly, I guess, here. This is where we'll set the origin. So it's Control-Shift-Alt-C. Origin to, wait, no. Shift-S. Cursor to center. Control-Shift-Alt-C. Then origin to 3D cursor. And that flashlight's origin is now at the dead, well, right here. A little bit above where it was initially. So from here, we can now just go export it as FBX and simply overwrite it. And I forgot to unselect some stuff. I'll change something. So make sure selected objects is checked before you save it. Otherwise, you'll have this guy in it. So there's our FBX model. I'm blind as a bat. Path is, so it's on the desktop. Let's just go ahead and right click and report. And look at it again. Press E. You can see it is now at a much more, well, a normal spot in it. We could probably go down a little bit farther, but that's okay for us. And we will get into attaching an actual light and making it functional in the next video. So I'll see you then.